got together with him and I said, I don't really know what I'm doing here. What do you recommend? He said, and I'll never forget this. He said, I will help you become a situation comedy writer, but there are two things that you must do. It wasn't exactly an Obi-Wan Kenobi moment, but kind of like that.
Mm.
He said, you have to listen to what I'm saying. And I said, what? And he repeated it. And I finally got that he was serious. And he said, you have to pay it forward. I'm going to teach you some stuff, and then you have to teach other writers. And I said, well, what's that all about? He said, this is Hollywood. Everybody hates writers. It's writers against everyone. And the only ones we have who are allies are ourselves and one another. And so this idea of writers helping writers to get in the industry and stay in the industry was very much alive at the time and is still alive. The thing I didn't recognize at the time was that I would make this part of my life mission. Like, I became so interested in helping other writers that it quickly became half of everything I did. So in the late 1980s, you would have found me writing situation comedies and working for some shows like that you've heard of, like Married with Children and Charles in Charge, and a few others. And then a lot of shows that thankfully you never will have heard of, because they and my contributions to their efforts, not the greatest, but that's fine. But in the meantime, I was almost immediately teaching. I was teaching at UCLA in the Writers Extension program because I had this idea that I didn't really understand everything about my craft, and that if I wanted to understand it better, I should find someone to pay me to teach it. And if you're taking notes on this work, ladies and gentlemen, that's the kind of thing you want to keep your eye on. If there's something you want to know how to do better, like be a stand-up comic or be a comic of any kind, the more you invest in teaching other people how to do it, the better it's going to be for you and for them, but mostly for you. Because when you set out to tell other people why you do what you do and how you do it, you illuminate your own experience. For me, at that time, I didn't understand story. I couldn't figure out how to tell the beginning and the middle and the end of a story. But by figuring it out in a bunch of different classes, I started to acquire some technology, some tools that I could use over and over again to stay out of the space I never want to be in, and I know you never want to be in. And that's the space where there's no path forward. The only way to create anything is to get lucky, to be smacked in the head with creativity. I wanted strategies, I wanted tools. And since they didn't exist, I invented them for myself. So if you're interested in thinking how I think, you'll keep your eye on two things at all times. One is the work that you're doing, and the other is how you are doing the work that you're doing. In other words, you do some writing, you get some outcomes. You see a joke that you really like, and then you pause and you ask yourself, what was I thinking when I invented this joke? How did my mind work? And maybe you'll discover a little rule for yourself, like, I'm going to make one up here. When I tell a joke that works, my mind skips a beat. By that I mean there's the joke, there's the setup, there's a punchline, there's a space in between that I really don't understand. But when I leave that space out, the joke works better. Now I have a tool I can use. If the joke's not funny, try taking pieces out and take out more and more pieces until it does become funny. And once you go there, folks, then the magic happens, because now you're no longer a slave to God-given creativity. You have your process under control. That was a long-winded answer, Rob. We went all the way from 1980 to the present day.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure we left a few spaces unexpressed in between. Where shall we go next?
Well, I think.
Sorry, can I just jump in here for a second? By the way, folks, so you know, we are going to carve out some time before the end of this for some question and answer. So if as I'm talking, you're not quite understanding what I'm saying, or it triggers an idea of your own, or there's something else you want to discuss, just know you'll have a chance to chat about that, at least in the chat window. Yeah. Right. Sorry, Rob, I interrupted.
No, it's okay. So one of the most impactful things from my reading of the book, and this is over 15 years ago, was what I believe you call the rule of nine. Right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I can. By luck, I discovered the rule of nine. The rule of nine says for every 10 jokes you try, 9 won't work. And the first time you hear that, you're shocked and dismayed. You say, my gosh, I'm looking at a failure rate of over 90% or of exactly 90%. That's pretty hellish. How will my ego survive? Actually, it turns out that the rule of nine is a tremendously powerful way to serve your ego. Because if you have one joke, and I'm sure you've all had this experience, if you have one joke, you have to invest 100% of your ego in the success or failure of that joke. If you have one joke and they laugh, you feel 100% good. If you have one joke and they don't laugh, you feel 100% bad. But if you have 10 jokes, then your ego investment in any one of those jokes is only 10%. And you can always suffer a 10% blow to your ego without experiencing full ego death. So if I have the power of the list on my side, if I say to myself, I'm going to try to solve this problem 10 different ways, knowing that I only need one solution that really works, a couple of great things happen. One is I do a lot more work, like 10 times more work, because I'm not afraid of the outcomes. I know most of it won't work anyhow. So it's really just practice. But that's the other good thing it does. It helps us build our practice. And what we take away from this is in the normal course of our thinking, we overinvest our egos in every individual joke or poem or creative stroke or painting or whatever. But if we really want to be successful in our creative practice, that is to say, have something that we can do all day, every day, and feel good about, the solution is simply to generate more content with the understanding that there will be so much in that content that we never use and we don't have to care about, that when the good stuff comes along and it sets our brains on fire, we can take it as a win, knowing that it was a hard-won win, one that we got, a success that we achieved by being willing to fail 9 times. That's what that's about.
So, in your experience, would you consider someone who is to write? Again, I think you mentioned that a lot of comedians feel they need to be God inspired, right? Or something will click. Oh, that's funny, and that's a great joke, and when it hits me, I write it down, and that's how I get my material. Your book, clearly states the Comic Toolbox, right? And I believe that these tools that you're talking about are useful in just generating material, right? Generating masses and masses. Is that a fair assessment? Uh, for instance, I used to be that guy. So I would say, okay, when it hits me, it's funny. I've written some really funny things. And then I saw this documentary called Comedian by Jerry Seinfeld. And one of the themes, and one of the most impactful scenes from it was when he decided that comedy wasn't just something he did at night. And, it was a job, and he looked at it as a job, and he actually sits down. Even to this day, I've watched recent interviews with him, and he has spent 3-4 hours a day writing as his job. Do you feel that this is something that, as a writer, you yourself do, or your students should be doing?
When I was young, I used to spend 4 minutes of worrying for every 1 minute of writing. This was the problem with my practice. I just worried more than I wrote. In my later days, as I am now, I would say I spend about 1 minute of worrying for every 4 minutes of writing. So I flipped the percentages, but I haven't ever made the worry go away. When you speak of sitting down and writing every day, I don't think the problem really is I don't know what to say, or I don't enjoy writing, or I don't enjoy coming up with jokes. I would say for most people, and myself included, the really biggest drawback of all is the fear. The thing that keeps us from having productive working days, the days that we don't really have to force ourselves to, but want to get to, is just figuring out a way to understand how fear is involved. Because you know what the win is. You know what you stand to gain by operating creatively. You get high. That's really what it amounts to. The kinds of working days we're talking about, where we're sitting 3, 4, 5 hours at a time, just doing our creative thing. And for me, that could be writing jokes. It could be making art. There are a lot of different things that I like to spend my creative energy on. I do them all because they get me high, because they get my endorphins going. They stimulate me. They make me feel good neurochemically. And they also make me feel like I'm doing my job in the world. So there's a lot of benefit that I understand from putting in a good day's work. And you guys understand the same benefit. You want that for yourselves. You've had the experience of that for yourselves. Where the process breaks down, I'm convinced, is where we start to be afraid. Because the minute we start to be afraid, we start to judge. Check me on this. You're writing along and everything is going great. And then you write a joke that just makes you pee your pants. It's so funny. You write it down, it came out, you're looking at that joke. You can't stop looking at it and laughing at it. And you think, I want to write a bunch more like this. And then a little voice inside your head says, well, you might think it's funny, but they might not think it's funny. And the minute you start thinking about how they might not think it's funny, then the judgment comes in and the process breaks down. This is called taking ourselves off the page. If I have information to share with you about how to have a good writing practice, I can give it to you in 4 words. Let me see if it's 4. Stay on the page. Keep writing. Because all of the things that will make you stop writing have nothing to do with, I don't know what to write next, and everything to do with, I fear that what I write next won't be good. So if we focus on that and step outside of that, then we can get to the place that Seinfeld was talking about, which is where you spend all your days doing the thing that brings you such creative joy. Not because you force yourself to it, but just because you've built up your practice of doing it. And part of what you've built up in your practice of doing it is learning how not to be afraid of your own negative judgments.
Let me switch topics here.
Sure, let's talk about the Mars lander that just landed.
Did it land? Did it make it?
I don't know. I have no idea. I don't live in that world.
Most stand-up comedians, and that's, I think, the majority of folks who are on this call are stand-ups primarily, approach stand-up writing, comedy writing, as a solitary activity. They write their jokes by themselves. They go out and test them on stage, and they usually have their own process. They're not really collaborators. Now, what we do in these sessions that Joke Zoom runs, a little different, but most of the folks are working on their material on their own in a situation like you're working on a sitcom and working with other writers. What's the experience like collaborating on comedy? What was it like for you?
It depends very much on the room you're in. I've been in some sitcom writing rooms that have been very toxic and unpleasant places. Part of the arc of my career is I so didn't enjoy being in those rooms that I left. And the other part of it is, for all the times that I have been responsible for leading writers' rooms, I've tried to make my environments really warm and welcoming. I think it's more effective and more fun. But at the highest levels of Hollywood, there are a lot of powerful people with strong personalities, very funny, and also hugely insecure. And the way that insecurity can manifest itself is in competition, in the sense that if you win, I lose. I don't sign on to any of this, but it's prevalent in the rooms. In a well-structured writing room, you will find someone whose job it is to steer the ship and not so much make decisions, but help people solve problems. Is the best way to look at it. When I'm playing that role, I like to be a strong decision maker. That is to say, I want to reach a point of saying, I think we can all agree that the story looks like it's going this way, so let's continue to develop it in that direction for now. I'm also interested in writers' rooms that are supportive of one another. A great expression in my experience is writers, sitcom writers, are like dogs on their back in submission position. They're lying on their back, fearing to get kicked, hoping to get scratched. That's the fundamental sitcom writer's experience. So in my room, we have a motto: don't kick, scratch. Don't make people feel bad, make people feel good. For those of you who are interested in operating in that space, you need to find people who are like you, who share your vision and your goals. Because if you're in a room full of people who do not share your vision and your goals, it's going to be hard for you to have fun, and it's going to be hard for you to feel good about the outcome. With that said, if you are serious about being a professional and working your way up in that craft, there are many times when you're in bad rooms, and then you just have to say to yourself, there's much to be learned here. I'll try to learn what I can without going crazy. I'm trying to think of.
Well, I mean, that's I don't have a personal experience with a Hollywood writer's room, an industry writer's room, right? I know that I've worked with others on projects, and I tend to agree with you. If the vision needs to be clear, and usually that depends on leadership, right? And having someone that not only that you fear, but that, like you said, that's someone that you feel is supportive of you, right? How you find that in, I guess, the Hollywood of today, I don't even know if that's even possible, right?
I'm not really interested in the Hollywood of today. I don't think that those of us here necessarily should be thinking about that. Let's put it this way. The real question is, where do I get my next funny joke? How do I solve the problem of being funny now, today?
Mm-hmm.
And we get caught up in questions of how is it going to manifest in my career. I think that'll just keep us from coming up with funny stuff. We have a note in the chat box I want to respond to. Let's hear unique tips on making jokes funny. Anyone else interested in this? And it's not to let Melissa steer the conversation, but I have to tell you where I'm coming from.
Sure.
I am so afraid of leaving anybody feeling unsatisfied that I have an almost slavish need and insecurity to speak to that. So let's think about myself as a comic character. Imagine that my controlling idea is I'm more afraid of insecurity than anything else. I'm more afraid of offending people than anything else. What could you, anybody in your chat window, do right now to make fun of me or to make me suffer? This is by way of answering Melissa. Let's hear unique tips on making jokes funny, because what we're going to find is that what comes out in this conversation will lead to just those tips you are looking for. For example, if I'm more insecure than anything else, you could hurt my feelings just by turning off your video. And if everybody turned off their video, that would be super funny, because it would be exaggeration. If one person does it, it's not funny. If 10 people does it, it's 10 times funny. If everybody does it,
it's hysterical.
Then it's super funny. Start talking about our own things in the chat. Ignore
right.
you.
Yeah,
yes. Anything that ignores me. So here's my tip, Melissa. If you want to find out what's funny, start by asking who's suffering, how are they suffering, and then make them suffer more. That's my unique tip of this moment for making things funny. make their bad situation worse.
Right.
Rob, back to you.
Well, and this is something that you teach your students. We didn't really mention this, but you're also an educator, right? You work. Well, you did mention it, but you give workshops, seminars, classes all over the world. You've been doing that since before you wrote the book, right? When you do this, have you been doing this online at all? Good question, right?
Good question, Rob.
See where I'm segueing into something here.
That is an amazing coincidence that you should ask that question, Rob, because Rob, weren't you and I just talking about the possibility of my doing a series of classes with JokeZoom?
Yeah, well,
that is an astounding coincidence. Let's just imagine what that would be like. We might have people thinking, well, this John Vorhaus, he probably has one or two more tips he hasn't shared with us. Maybe I'd like to take a 2-hour class with him, or 2-hour classes, or maybe a series of classes. Mm-hmm. And boy, what I really wish I would see now is a poll that would give me my own personal opportunity to weigh in on what and how John Vorhaus might teach at JokeZoom. Well, do I have that right?
I just coincidentally, John, I have such a poll. And
do you now?
I'll try to show it to everybody right now. And as they see that, and if we could get folks, if they care to, fill it out and give their answers.
I vote for a one-time 2-hour workshop because I don't know more than 2 hours worth of stuff.
I don't believe that one bit. But while we're doing that, I think this is an opportune time for us to switch gears and move into the Q&A section of the presentation. Now, I think I can change the status, the mute status of everybody, and if not enable your microphones, allow you to enable them. So why don't we do that? And let's try to be civil and orderly and ask questions one at a time. I'm sure we can do this, but you should be able to unmute your microphone. If you have a question for John, let's try asking it. Is anyone able to?
Ellen, let's go to Ellen. She's raising her hand like a,
all right, sure,
like a good student.
Thanks for being here, and thank you, Rob. John, do you know a guy named Jerry Persigian?
No, but I'm going to guess he's Armenian.
Yeah, he wrote for Married with Children in like 2004.
Oh, I was long gone. I was Married with Children 1987, 1988. And I didn't rejoin Married with Children until I worked on the Russian version in 2007. So, and we didn't cross paths there.
You know Phil Rosenthal?
Funny story about Phil Rosenthal. You might have seen the documentary called Exporting Raymond. If you haven't seen it, you might want to watch it. It's the story of the making of Everybody Loves Raymond in Russia. And it happens that I was overseeing Married with Children in Russia at the exact same time. They're both Sony projects. So if you watch the documentary and you see the wrap party scene near the end of the documentary, I'm in a shot for that long. So that's how well I know Phil. We were at the same party at the same time.
Okay.
Thank you.
The same is true, by the way, for Dennis Hopper. I shared a dinner with Dennis Hopper in Bucharest, Romania. I was there making Romanian sitcoms, and he was there making a movie at one of these post-communist film studios with the, the bugs and the wiretaps still in place. And what I remember most about that was he spent the entire meal, and I mean literally the entire meal, with a giant telephoto lens camera held up blocking his face. Like nobody saw his face all night long, just the lens of his camera. It was the most Freudian thing I'd ever seen in my life because this was a long lens.
Okay. All right. Anyone else have a question? Phil Sweet.
Hello. My comic sensei, if you will, has said in the past, you don't write comedy, you find it, which I would think I have found that to be true because I do observational humor mainly, and so I find things that just look odd and go from there. Not to diminish the value of writing every day.
I think that's true. These days when I walk, like my pandemic walks, I've been focused on abandoned furniture, and I've built up quite a collection of photos of street furniture, for no other reason than that I find it funny. What I'm interested in, maybe this is a good way to look at it, Phil, and this is from the Comic Toolbox as well. Eastern creativity describes creativity as carrying buckets to the river. And what that means is there's art to be found, there's comedy to be found, there's literature to be found. All we have to do is find it. But that metaphor kind of gives the impression that all you can do is carry buckets to the river. My approach is more like, let's throw up some dams and some reservoirs and some aqueducts and get some irrigation going so that I can have both, Phil. So I can be walking down the street and find a joke lying on the ground and pick it up and put it in my pocket. But also, when I need to take that joke home and turn it into a bit, I have the technology that will let me take that funny thing and pump it up until it serves a larger purpose. That's how I think about that.
I think maybe the message was, don't be unaware of those things that are lying in the street. If you trip over one, pick it up.
And an even better message is be aware, just in two simple words, be aware. A lot of what keeps us from finding the funny that's all around us is that we're just not paying attention. And probably we're not paying attention. This is going to get a little metaphoric here, guys, but stay with me. You remember answering machines?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. You know what it means that an answering machine is set on announce only? You can't record a message. You can only have an outbound message. A lot of us walk through our lives with our answering machine set on announce only. We're so insecure about how people around us are going to respond to us and so fearful of outcomes and consequences that we don't really have enough freedom to feel the full self-awareness that will just let us, for example, be playful in our environments. So why I'm finding something funny and taking a picture of it, part of the reason is I'm not afraid to discover that it's not as funny as I thought it was. If I am afraid, then I never take the picture and I never show it to anybody. So I think on the deeper level, Phil, it's really about not even awareness, but self-awareness.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a follow-up question actually to that, if I could, John.
Yeah.
So
Only if you pronounce your last name for me. Ascolese?
you can call me Vincent, but yeah.
Okay.
Ask Elise, but yeah.
Okay.
So I'm from a similar writing school that Phil went to, sort of, and that was, we would write 10 pages and we would sort of pan for gold at the end of the day, bring it into the class and read it to everybody, and eventually we would get a little mineral that would be farmed from there. But the problem is now I don't have that sort of room to do that in. I sort of bring more polished jokes to the joke Zoom arena and edit it and manipulate it that way. So how do I know if I wrote 10 pages, what in that 10 pages could be farmed for gold, so to speak? You know what I mean?
Well, first of all, I love the concept of mining it and then refining it, getting a lot of raw material and working from it. The first person to test your material on is yourself, but test honestly. If it makes you laugh and you know it's funny, then you can trust it. But if you only hope it's funny because you're afraid it's not funny, then you can't trust it. And once again, we see there is an ego investment here. If I come up with a joke, I have an investment. I have a vested interest in having that joke be funny because that's how I feel good about myself. If I can think past that, I'll say the joke is either funny or it's not funny. And I'm either going to feel good about myself or not feel good about myself for things unrelated to that joke. Once that's cleared out, then I can test authentically. I can say to myself, according to my understanding of my craft, I think that joke is pretty funny. Then, having passed that test, we obviously have to test the material with others. And that's called open mics and going up on stage and submitting to contests and The Onion or however else you're trying to move your product. be clear-eyed and objective with your own material, and be super hard on your own material, so that if nothing else, when you take it out into the world, they can't say that you were lazy. I mean, we've all had that experience in open mics where it's clear that the people who are doing the mics, and ourselves from time to time, we just don't know what's funny. And we're still kind of trying to figure it out, work it out in front of the mic. That's fine. But you can also tell when somebody, they know the joke isn't funny, but they want it to be funny. So they're trying to sell it as funny, even though they know it's not funny. And when I encounter people like that, I have two responses. The first is, wow, my heart goes out to you because I can feel your suffering right now. And the other thought I have is, I can really fix that. If I could just have 5 minutes with you, I could show you where your self-awareness lies, and I could expose that to you, and then you wouldn't worry about whether the joke lands or doesn't land. Because it's the act of worrying about whether the joke lands that spoils the moment for you, spoils the moment for the audience, and ultimately kills the joke. And by the way, guys, I'm saying this as a newbie practitioner, because I've been teaching and training writers all my life, but I have lately started doing online open mics. Why? Because I don't have to leave my house, and that's a tremendous advantage to me. I never did want to do stand-up before because I always thought it was such a long wait for a short ride. But now I can tap it right away, and I feel good about it. But what I'm discovering is exactly as it is with my teaching. There comes a moment in the presentation when I lose self-consciousness. And by that, I mean I lose both awareness of myself and I lose the fear of feeling bad in front of other people. And I'm sure you know this feeling yourselves. It's that feeling of being in the flow or in the zone or in the groove, whatever you want to call it. That's what we're looking for. That's what we're trying to achieve. What I would put to you is worrying about outcome is a direct block that keeps you out of the flow. And the minute you stop worrying about outcome, the easier it is to get into the flow and the better the outcome becomes. So with kind of a Zen-like perversity, we could say, to serve the outcome, ignore the outcome. Wow, I would like to see that on a embroidery or a bumper sticker. Like just driving down the road and I see a bumper sticker and it says, to serve the outcome, ignore the outcome. I wouldn't know what to make of that, but I would think that's a smart person driving that car.
I think
Other questions?
I think DC has a question. Do you have a question,
Yeah,
DC?
DC.
Yeah, dude.
Hey.
I love what you're sharing so far, John. Appreciate it. And I know that when we're writing comedy, performing comedy, there's a certain formula we're accustomed to following, set up punch or rule of threes. Like it's repeatable. But are there any comedians or performers that that you can think of or that you can recall that are successful, that are doing it excellently, that have not necessarily followed the formula of writing comedy that we are accustomed to writing? Like who stands out to you?
That's a great question. I'm going to give you 3 names, and then I'm going to tie them together for you. And the names I'm going to give you are Stephen Wright, Robin Williams, and Eddie Izzard. And they have very different styles, but what they have in common is they're executing their comedy through their voice. A Stephen Wright joke has a feel to it that no other joke has. A Robin Williams go off in some strange tangential direction, has a rhythm and a presence and authenticity, authentic to Robin, that nobody else has. Eddie Izzard looks at history and society through his Eddie Izzard eyes, and what he comes out with is its own form and structure, its own type of storytelling, as far away from Stephen Wright's one-liners as you can get. The thing that holds them together is that the comedy is filtered through the comic's voice, that is to say, the comic's way of looking at the world, rather than filtered through the idea of structuring an act correctly. Having said that, structuring an act is where you start. The structure is the place that lets the voice come out. Without structure, you just have voice. You're not really going anywhere. You might be landing on funny occasionally, but you don't even know what you're driving at. Let me try this one more time, because I love this question, and its layers deep. At a certain point in our development as comedians, we're writing for the audience. We write a joke and we say, if this joke works, my audience will be pleased. And I think it's going to work because it's structurally correct. Set up, punchline. Capper. Bananas on bananas. Next joke. Pause. Strategic pause. Or funny look. All of that stuff has to do with how the joke is structured in order to please the audience. The minute the comedian says, the audience for my material is me, I'm trying to please me with my act, make this work as well as I can according to my understanding of what I'm trying to do. That's when you stop writing jokes that will work for the audience and start building a voice that will work for you to express yourself to the audience. I want to bring this down to the level of tip for you. In the Comic Toolbox, in a lot of my work, you'll find this thing called the comic filter, which asks you the question, how do you look at the world in a unique way that other people don't? And your comic filter might be innocent or conceited or nervous or greedy or asshole or fool or white or black or male or female or any other strong filter of reality. When you turn your attention to driving reality through that filter, that's when you build an act. That's when you get outside the structure and into the essence. And Maria, thank you for telling me that Eddie Izzard identifies as she now. I did not know that. I will take it on board.
Thanks for answering. Just to follow up that.
Yes.
How important nowadays for performers is the structure of the laugh per minute as a benchmark of funny comedian versus, okay, is this comedian speaking and talking and performing stuff, material that is memorable? I mean, there's, which one has more weight as part of our journey right now? Which one it has more weight? Which one should we gravitate towards? Or I mean, in your perspective?
It depends on where you're at, and it depends on who your audience is. In this day and age, we can find a lot of rooms and virtual rooms where the audience's expectation is, tell me a joke that I understand as a joke so that I can get the laugh I'm looking for and go about my day. In other places, in other rooms, people are saying, tell me the truth of your experience. That's what I really want to know about. And the setup, punchline is going to work well in the former room. It's not going to work well in the latter room. You kind of have to know what room you're in. Just think about where I am now. Because I have presented this to you as a teaching thing, I don't have to be funny at all. It doesn't matter whether I'm one joke or 10 jokes or no jokes or 1,000 jokes. You might have laughed at a couple of things I've said. If you haven't, I'm not going to hold it against you. It's Zoom. It's probably you're not hearing me clearly. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But I created an expectation. Come and let's talk about what's going on inside of comedy, rather than come and listen to me and laugh at what I have to say. So the low bar, DC, they say, is telling jokes that everybody gets. The higher bar is communicating the truth of your experience. And for you and for everybody, I would say that's really the name of the game. Find out what you want to say about who you are and talk about that. That'll be much richer than any let's talk about airplane food joke you could come up with.
Thank
in
you.
Fact, think about, sorry, I'm on a roll now. Think about how many times you've done open mics and somebody else has done a version of your same joke. Same topic. Anybody? Just
that happens?
Yeah. And it's not that they're stealing your joke or you're stealing their joke. It's just that you're operating in the same joke space. But I would put it to you that you, as an individual, you have a joke space that nobody else can operate in. So one good way to test your material is to look at the joke you've written and ask yourself, could anybody other than me have written it? And the answer is no, only I have that way of looking at the world, or only I am interested in that thing, or only I have my joke name. That's a joke you want to save. But if it looks like a joke that anybody could tell, don't even bother telling it. It won't help you. It won't help you grow.
Okay, I think we have a question from Thiago. Am I pronouncing that right? Thiago?
Tiago?
Hey,
Thiago?
hey, yeah, you did.
Hey, Tiago, I know that
Hey, John.
guy.
Yeah, long time
Wow.
fan, first time Zoom caller.
There you go.
Hey, man, how are you?
Good. I
know you've been teaching. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I was going to claim all kinds of cred for knowing how to pronounce Tiago with whatever random it turned out to be. But it turned out to be you. I learned how to pronounce Tiago from you. So
Thanks.
that's fun. So
Wow.
Tiago, everybody.
That's actually.
So sorry. And your question, caller.
Yes, my question is actually, it's been a while since you wrote your last writing, storytelling, joke writing book. But I know you've been teaching for a long time now, and I kind of want to know like what tools and tips and stuff you've been gathering all these years that
that I haven't shared.
Like gathered all this new knowledge, right? And you're like, oh my God, I learned this very useful tip, and I wish I could share it with you guys.
A lot of my latest secrets are to be found in this book, A White Belt in Art. And the reason that I mention it to writers is I learned a lot about creative process from starting over as an artist. And I learned a lot about facing fear. Here's one thing I know now that I didn't know before, Tiago. For an artist and for a comedian, there are things called eye, hand, and voice, where eye is your ability to recognize when something around you has potential. Hand is your ability to turn that potential into something worthwhile. And voice is the reason for doing it. So for someone in your case, Tiago, you're still in Brazil, are you not? Tiago? Yes. And I imagine that Brazil is a pretty challenging place to be right now. So you might find that your eye wants to recognize clearly what's happening in your society. Your hand wants to turn your observations into meaningful or funny communication with other people. And your voice is the motivation or mission you have in turning your attention to this specific creative task. And if I may, Tiago, I would say something that's different about me now from the person who taught you less than 10 years ago is I've had the experience of starting over from scratch with much less fear and with a lot more information about how to make a creative practice work. So my usable intelligence about what's going on inside this head is higher because I've made myself relearn stuff. So that's, and if you want more such postmodern tips, maybe sign up for that class that Rob and I are going to offer at some point in the intermediate future.
All right. I think we have Carolyn has a question.
Hi, Carolyn. You're inside your own little aluminum foil hat there, huh? The black helicopters are not going to find you.
Blanket, and I've got a heater here. I'm trying to heat the whole thing in here because it's freezing in here.
Oh, where are you?
My own little cocoon in my basement. I've made my own little cocoon.
Where am I? She's in
where am I? Half the time I don't know where I am, so I don't know other people. But thank you so much.
In a secure, undisclosed location.
Undisclosed is right. No drone is going to find me. Thank you so much for taking your time to share your wisdom with us.
My pleasure.
I have it's pretty much this. Basically, I'm a clean comic, and I do make observations, and I noticed that there is a lot more of censorship that's going on with what we can say and what we can't say. And I know, for example, Blazing Saddles never could have been made today, apparently. And I'm concerned about that because when you just have basic observations, like what a child would have, just, approaching it with a childlike innocence and just observing things, I feel that we're stunted by what is considered taboo now because of feelings being offended. And how do you feel? How does one deal with this without stunting their growth as an artist? I mean, I don't want to say that you say, mean things or anything, but even things that you would observe, you've got to be just super, super careful. How do you handle that?
I have several answers. Let me see if I can rattle them off. The first is taboo is a sliding scale. What is considered taboo is always changing, and it changes from room to room, group to group, groups in society. A group of only men will have a different set of taboos than a group of only women, and a different set of taboos than a mixed group. So the first question is, what is taboo in the room that I'm in? The second observation is, the trouble with too far is you never know you're going till you've gone. So as you push yourself to the limit of taboo, to the point where people will really start to get nervous about what you're saying, it's going to be funny because they're nervous, because it's right up to the edge of too far. Sometimes you go over and you have to be prepared to pay that price. Your innocence is your safety net. And the other thing that's a safety net, I'm going to use the word honor. If you honor the subject of your material, if you have love for whatever you're talking about, that'll give you a lot more room to be funny without having people feel like you're, what are they, punching up, punching down, sideways. I don't even know what it's called. Let's see if I can give you an example. I am straight. So there are all kinds of jokes about gay people that I can't make simply because I don't have information authority over the space, let's say. But if I do want to make jokes in that terrain, it can't be at the expense of gayness. It has to be at the expense of flawed attitudes about gayness. Okay. Because my joke is not to attack people who are gay. My joke is intended to illuminate the relationship that exists between in this case, marginalized minorities and the population as a whole. So if you come to your material with love and honor, that's always going to work. Also, you can always tell a joke against them on yourself. I'm trying to think of an example. When I worked in Russia, the thing that astounded me was that my Russian writers would tell homophobic and sexist jokes right to my face, like the most amazing, horrible things. They'd also tell anti-Semitic jokes, and I'm Jewish. And then they found out I was Jewish, and they didn't even care about that. So it sort of created a space where I had a kind of freedom I didn't have in other circumstances because the rules were so different. And kind of the common idea was, we don't know what your norms are. We don't really care what your norms are. You're in our playground now, so you're going to abide by our norms. Finally, if the audience isn't working for you, find another audience. You're not going to be all things to all people anyhow. Your audience is always a bell curve. And the curve, let me see if I can draw it. It goes like this, and it goes up like that, and it goes down, and it goes out like that. Standard bell curve. This side of the bell curve is comprised of people who won't laugh at your jokes because they don't have enough information to solve the puzzle of the joke. They don't know what you're driving at. This end of the scale are people who aren't going to laugh at your joke because they've heard it before. It's not new. It's not funny. They don't care. And that whole structure slides depending on the audience you're talking to. Sometimes you have a smart audience or an accepting audience, and you can push further in the direction of the dangerous end of the scale. Sometimes you have a less intelligence or a less accepting audience, so you have to come back over here. But always what you're looking for is the BFM, the big fat middle. That's the audience that you're trying to serve, with the understanding that you're going to go too far and it won't be the end of the world. Yeah. Richard.
Yes. How do you read an audience to know if a joke will work or not? Or with the age, or how do you go about when you see the audience? If you see the audience, you're telling a joke, or you want to tell a joke, you realize, oh, maybe they might not get this. How do you read the audience for the?
Well, first of all, if you're afraid that the audience might not get the joke, load the joke with the information they need. I'll give you an example. I'm a California Jew. California Jews are notoriously not religious people. In fact, what's the technical name for a California Jew? Presbyterian. Funny, right? But what if I say it this way? I'm a California Jew. What's the technical name for California Jew? Presbyterian. If you don't know why California Jews, if you don't know that California Jews aren't that religious, the joke doesn't work. Knowing that you might not know that, I put the information you need right into the joke. And that's how you can save a joke or make a joke work for a broader audience, just by making sure the audience has the information they need. But in terms of a hot room or a cold room, yikes, you think you've got a great room and it turns out they're asleep, or they're not drunk enough, or they're too drunk, or the Quaaludes haven't kicked in or something, or maybe you're just having a bad night. For me personally, I find that people don't laugh at me because I talk too fast. And I'm thinking right now about the work I do with overseas writers. I spent most of my career talking to people in English who don't have English as their first language. Most of them are quite fine in English, but every now and then I'll tell a joke that I expect to work, and it doesn't work just because they don't get the cultural reference, or they don't know the word that I'm using. So I take pains to explain that which I think needs to be explained.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else have a question?
Yes, Ashley. Ashley.
Hi, John. Ashley Goodermuth, Senator from New Jersey. I have a question. You talk a lot about truth and pain. And I wonder if and I know you were talking earlier about making people suffer more. But is there a different way to say truth and pain? For some reason, that has never clicked in my brain. I don't know why. It could be me. But is there a different way to phrase it?
Well, for a long, long time, I thought the answer to everything was comedy is truth and pain. Just like for a long time, I thought the answer to everything was God is love, something like that. And one day I woke up and I said, you know what? Comedy isn't truth and pain. What comedy is cruelty. Comedy is cruelty. And maybe you'll take that aboard, not in the sense that you're setting out to be cruel, but in the sense that someone in this joke, somewhere, someone is suffering. And my job is to figure out who's suffering and make them suffer worse. If truth and pain sounds too much like a deconstruction, maybe go at it from that point of view. But if you do, understand, the object is not to make people suffer. The object is to understand or be aware of the suffering that's present and highlight it, because that's where the humor really lies. I'm trying to think of an example that illustrates this point. This is an old dumb joke, but a guy falls off the Empire State Building and he passes the 31st floor, and somebody says, how's it going? And he says, so far, so good. Now, we can look at it in terms of truth and pain. The truth is the guy is falling, and the pain is that he's about to die. But we can also look at it through the filter of cruelty and say, why we're finding this funny is that guy is falling to his death, and we fear falling to our deaths. Part of us is feeling really, really good that it's him falling to his death and not me. And so by highlighting the suffering of that guy, you actually make the audience feel better about their own experience. I'm going to throw another example at you. And that's the movie Pretty Woman, which has this fairy tale at the center of it. Heartless businessman and a hooker with a heart of gold fall in love and fix each other. And they live happily ever after, the end. They go through a tremendous amount of suffering in order to achieve their happy ending. And we enjoy their suffering from a comic point of view, but we really enjoy it from a story point of view because it tells us, if you suffer like these people suffered, you will win like they won. And this is kind of the heart and soul of every happy ending story. If you struggle hard enough and suffer long enough, you're going to win and it's going to be great. And it's a fantasy that the storyteller tells to the audience. And I realize with this, Ashley, that I'm completely off your topic. So I'm going to,
it's great.
I'm going to try and wheel it back. If comedy is not truth and pain, what is comedy? Surprise, defeat of expectation. Yeah, maybe if you're not happy looking for comedy at the intersection of truth and pain, try looking at the intersection of the expected and the unexpected. I can give you an example. This joke won't really work. It's demonstrated itself not to work in many circumstances, so I'm not worried about it not working here. But the joke goes like this. Tomorrow, I was thinking about time travel. And that's the joke not working. But there's no truth and pain in it, except the truth and pain of a comic telling a joke that doesn't really work. So maybe that is a joke that exists in defeat of expectation or in the unexpected space, where I'm trying to tell you that the act of thinking about time travel somehow creates time travel. I don't know. At the end of the day, if they don't laugh, it's not funny. That's just the bottom line.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
Nobody. All right. Sean Powers.
Ziggy.
All right. Ziggy. Where is
Should
Ziggy?
you be trying to please yourself with your jokes or the largest part of the bell curve?
If you're Andy Kaufman, you don't give a rat's ass about the bell curve, any part of the bell curve. But here's what pleases me. I got a lot to say. I think I'm funny. When I stand before a group of people and say what I want to say, and they both laugh and get it, I feel fulfilled. So in the sense, I've created my act in an effort to feel fulfilled, in the same way that I would when I'm doing a painting or doing a drawing or doing a whatever, writing a script. I'm doing it to feel good about the act of doing it and feel good about the act of presenting it to other people. They're going to like it. They're not going to like it. That's going to be on them. If I'm just trying to serve the big fat middle and they don't like me, I have no place to fall. I have nowhere to go. I've lost. I am a loser. But if I'm trying to please myself and do the best I can to tell my truth to the world in whatever form I choose to express it, if they don't get it or they don't like it, that's on them. I still have a place to fall because I still have done what I set out to do, which is have a fulfilling creative experience. And Tiago, to your question of what do I know now that I didn't know before, profoundly from art. As a writer, I always thought writing is about communication. I'm trying to take information from my head and get it into your head. And the way I'm doing it is by writing these words. So my understanding of the artistic relationship of artist and writer and audience is the written word is a bridge between the writer and the audience. It's nothing in and of itself. It's only a means to an end, communicating to that audience. Working in art helped me understand that there is a different relationship that exists between the artist and the art. The artist creates the art, builds a relationship with the work, takes satisfaction from that, if satisfaction is to be found, and then maybe someday hangs it on a wall and people say, oh, pretty picture. But the fundamental relationship is not between artist and audience, but between artist and art. And that's what I didn't know about writing that I know now. That as long as I'm thinking too hard about the audience, I'm going to overlook the thing that matters most, which is expressing myself as I choose to express myself as fully as I can express myself.
Okay.
That's the name of that tune.
Great. All right. We have a few more minutes left. We have two folks with their hands up.
Okay, wait. I'm going to jump in here and ask. Actually, no, we'll do the two and then we'll come back to me. I'll take the last question.
Sure. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So, Sean Powers, you have a question.
Do you have any advice on storytelling in the context of stand-up comedy?
Story is most easily understood as an arc of change from denial to acceptance of a theme. I'll say that again a little bit more slowly. Story is most easily understood as an arc of change from denial to acceptance of a theme. So if you want to put story into your storytelling, just ask yourself, what can I talk about where I can demonstrate how I changed my mind? I'll give you an example. People say traffic is bad in New York, but I don't think traffic is too bad. Okay, so I'm in denial of the proposition that traffic is bad. Now I go out on the street and I try to cross the street 10 different ways, and each one is a joke. Then at the end of that, I say, wow, you know what? Traffic really is as bad as they say. Not those words, but something like that. I'm building the joke bit on the structure of transformation of denial to acceptance of the theme, traffic is bad in New York. Do you understand how that works? You could do the same thing with COVID-19. You could do the same thing with Donald Trump. Let's just say, as an example, the lead into my bit is, I realize now that Donald Trump is gone that I never really came to terms with who he was. I never really focused on his good qualities. So I'm going to try to do that now. And then I riff through a half a dozen jokes that I will invent at some point in the future, and then arrive at, no, son of a gun, not so good, whatever the payoff is. I'm trying to sell myself on a proposition, and in the end, I fail to sell myself on the proposition, and that's story in its simplest terms in that space. Okay? I think if you hold on to the phrase arc of change from denial to acceptance, that will that'll help you think about your narrative in a more structured way. Last question. Who had it? Second to last question.
Ray Scanlon.
Can you hear me?
I can and see you.
Okay. This might be a little, I don't know. We'll see. Do you believe by chance, or do you believe the well is dry? Do you believe that there's no more gold, that all the avenues have been explored in comedy, that we've done everything and that there's nothing new? Because I think there's something new.
As long as there's farts, there's funny. But behind the joke, behind that joke is the understanding that your society is constantly changing, and your society is constantly inviting you to speak to it. You yourself are constantly changing, and you can always ask yourself, what's going on inside of me right now, and never run out of material until the day you die, possibly even after that. My latest conception of the relationship between life and afterlife, just so you know, I do believe that when we leave this life, we rise to a higher plane of existence, not unlike an off-Broadway show finally getting a Broadway run. So it's like that. But I think, Ray, what you're really trying to say is that the information stream is so saturated that there's no room for a new voice. And I would say that it's a double-edged sword. The internet and everything that it has brought us has created competition that we can't beat. Every one of us trying to make a living as a comic faces competition from people who don't care whether they make a living. And so the downward pressure on prices is through the floor. Any mic we want to sign up for, there's 1,000 other people who want to sign up for the same mic. There's just a lot of voices out there. There's so many voices that it's very hard for an individual to be heard. On the other hand, thanks to the very same technology, we have direct to consumer methods of storytelling that we never had before. Anyone here could do their own Zoom special, put it up on YouTube, and seek to find an audience for themselves. Here's the way I look at it. And I've looked at it this way since the dawn of the internet. The internet is this vast continent of space, and I can't occupy it all. All I can do is set up this tiny little amusement park in one tiny little corner of the space and try to build out little by little in my little amusement park. Add a few more people, do a few more things, put a little bit more material out there, build my space within this vast and infinite space that is cyberspace, with the full knowledge that I can't reach everybody unless I get fantastically lucky and break through like people do. I don't expect me to be the one who goes viral. I know for sure I won't go viral. I'm not the right age. I'm not 12. So that's my big problem. That's my big problem. But the challenge for me is not to say, I wish I could go viral. What can I do to go viral? The challenge to me is to be authentic with myself and say, you're the person you are. You can fill a room, but you can't fill an auditorium. You can speak to people who understand you and have your frame of reference, but you can't cross cultures. That's not who you are. And if you know for sure that you're never going to be as famous as you want to be, you better find some way to feel okay about that, because that's the likeliest outcome for this journey we're on. So for me personally, that means do a lot of stuff, do it as well as I can, hope that some of it lasts, but mostly focus on making this act of creation satisfying to me. Because if I can't satisfy myself as my audience, my first audience, then I'm just invoking sadness, and who needs that in their life? So that's what I would say. And also I would say, keep giving them you until you is what they want, which is a good way of navigating the space where we're trying to write for the audience or trying to write for ourselves. We really don't know. Just be the most you can be. That's the best advice there. Now, I promised that I would take one more question, and I'm going to take this last question psychically, if it's okay with you. It's
Sure.
just a little thing that I do. I'm reaching out across the Zoom wires, and I'm actually channeling you and the questions that are on your mind, and I think I have a fair grasp of them now. And I can say, yes, ladies and gentlemen, there are many ways to be in touch with me and many opportunities to buy my books and images. So glad you asked. Let's just take a look at the screen and consider what we have here. Amazon.com/author/JV. That's my Amazon website where you can find the Comic Toolbox and a lot of my other books. Somebody told me that I was lucky to have such a good author site, just my initials. That shows how early I adopted to Kindle Direct Publishing. JohnVorhaus.com, that's my website. It's the home of Bafflegab Books, where you can find some books that aren't available on Amazon, some books that you might like to have hand-signed copies of. And also you can get a look at some of my artwork there. It's a terrible website, I'm the first to admit it, but it's my home, my amusement park in cyberspace, so enjoy it while you're there. Next, I would skip down to the bottom, that tiny URL.com/JV's Everything Shop. That's my shop on Redbubble, where you can get all kinds of cool stuff on everything from coffee mugs to t-shirts. And I realized I'm wearing one of my t-shirts now, so I can actually show it to you. I hope you can see this. So, opioids, which is hilarious. That's hilarious to me.
Oh, that's hysterical.
And you can get that on a t-shirt or a coffee mug or a bath mat or a phone case, lots of cool stuff there. And then finally, my email, john.vorhaus@gmail.com. If there's something on your mind, shoot me an email. I have an aggressive open door policy. I always tell people, being as I am a generous person, if you send me an email, I will try to help you in any way I can to the absolute limit of my capability, so long as it doesn't take more than 5 minutes and I don't have to leave my desk. And there's a lot I can accomplish in 5 minutes sitting at my desk. So if there's something on your mind, feel free to reach out. Dedier, thank you for putting that in the chat where it's that much more useful to us.
Yeah, and you'll be receiving an email in the next day or so with all of John's information and some other relevant points.
Sorry, and then just to follow up, we are holding this session today. Hang on, I want to go back to Cal. There we go. We're holding this session today, folks, because we really want to find out if there's interest in classes, either one-off classes or a series of classes. And we kind of want to know what you're interested in and maybe how much you'd pay. How much would you pay for more time with this man who just gave you this time for free? it turns out that it can be monetized. I'm in competition with myself, as you can see, because I also like to give it away. So if you have meaningful educational needs that you would like to get met by a guy like me in a classroom or a workshop setting, now is a really good time to be a frickin' squeaky wheel. Because if I get the strong enough sense that you and people like you are interested in what you are interested in, that's the class I'm going to teach. And by the way, whether that's comedy or extraterrestrial, exoplanetary astronomy or water-free toilets, I don't care. I'll teach anything. I'm that good.
And to that end, those of you who have not taken the poll, it's still open. And if you care to, please submit your answers, because we'll be closing that as we close the session here. I want to take the opportunity to thank John. This has been very enlightening. I think he's an extraordinary talent. And like I said, as Tiago has got his books on display, it was instrumental in forming my opinions about comedy very early on in my stand-up career. And it's highly, highly recommended for you to go out and get your hands on and devour.
Got the whole library
devour there. And make notes, and then send John endless emails about
that'll be awesome too.
Discover in the book. Okay.
I just thought of this. If you're in Alcoholics Anonymous, they speak of being in the rooms. And it just occurs to me that stand-up comics in virtual open mics could very much be thought of in the same way. So if I said to you, I'll see you in the rooms, it's speaking to the same addiction.
That's right.
and
good point.
And a compulsion, I don't know, and therapeutic value of being in those rooms. Yeah. So I'll see you in the rooms.
Okay, let's give John a big round of applause as we end the session.
Thank you,
folks. If you're not aware, you are all welcome. If you've taken the time and have the interest to come and spend time here tonight with us, you're welcome to join us on jokezoom.com. And even if you just want to check it out and see what we're about, you're welcome. There's no fee. And we just want you to bring your funny. We'll try to help you do that. Okay, folks, everyone enjoy your evenings or days or whatever it may be.
Mornings, middle of the night.
Middle of the nights. And we'll see you soon. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Rob.
so much.
Bye, guys. Bye-bye.
Think positive, test negative.
Yeah.
Exactly.